Hello and welcome back to a brand new video. My name is Tony King. I'm a photographer, and in this video I want to talk about when and why to print photos, mainly why I've printed some of my photos and how I've displayed them in my home, why some of the photos that I've taken inspire me to continue to be creative, continue to take that similar style of photos, what maybe that photo taught me, aside from it being aesthetically pleasing or a photo that I enjoy looking at, what it reminds me of that I can take forward into my day, whether it's as a creative photographer, whether it's in my other work, or just in anything else. What does it teach me? If at any point you enjoy my photography or what I have to say about it, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more content just like this, but also way different, but all about photography. This is a slightly different video, but I'm always talking about photography. I do photo walks, I share my work. Yeah, just trying to learn and share what I'm learning, and hopefully that can help people learn, and maybe I can learn from people's reactions as well. So stay tuned for more videos. I hope you subscribe to my channel and stick around. And behind me, you'll see I have 12 photos here. This was my old set of photos that I had in my house. I had them set up in a way in my hallway. The hallway is what I walk through pretty much every day to go outside of the house, go from my office to my bedroom to my living room. I see it a lot. It's very accessible. The walls there, they look much nicer with something on it than bare, of course. And it's somewhere where I'm always gonna see what's up there. But these photos I aged out of a little bit, some of them, or I got a better print of a couple of them. I went ahead and put them here in my office on the wall because I needed something on the wall here too, and I still like the images, but the ones that I want to be exposed to the most are the ones that I put in the hallway, and I'm excited to talk about them and share them with you. I think the images that I set on for this iteration of hallway gallery type look are more in tune with where I'm at as a photographer now, what style I like now, and each one tells me something about what I want to see in my photography moving forward. So let's jump into it. So here we are in the hallway. This is the first image that I want to talk about. We have a dog on a hill. I've talked about this image before, and it's one that I really like. Maybe you'll know that I'm a cat person, not a dog person, and I actually have two dog photos here. But something is very interesting about the relationship between people and dogs. And here, the dog is chained to sort of the tree. It's not really clear actually, which is also an interesting element of the tree, but the way it's positioned with its body is like guarding and domineering in a way, but also there's an element of serenity and companionship that I see here, that you do your role, you look out for your people, and that's life. I think it's a representation of the relationship between the dog and its owner in a really nice way. And then overall aesthetically, there's a lot of layering here in the way that I was able to frame the dog in the bright area of the scene. We have some layering from the left side of the image going over to the right side of the image, which I think is a really nice aspect of this photo, and something that when I'm thinking about layering an image, I'm not just thinking about how I can layer it from the front to the back. This is more in the front of the frame as well. You can see that it's soft focus, but it's taking up a huge part of the left frame, which draws our eye more to this right third where we see our subject, the dog. Also, the tree over here is a leading line, which also pushes our eye to the dog. And of course, the sky as the background is very pleasant to really isolate the dog. And then of course we have green trees in the back and this cobblestone wall type thing at the front, which really sets it up very nicely. And the way that the layers are there create depth, but also a lot of direction for the eyes. And so when I'm looking at this photo, I'm thinking, well, how can I push the limits to my layering? How can I think past just trying to just get things in the frame? How can I use those things in the frame to really isolate the subject? And what does the subject mean? What does it represent? And this photo in particular represents something to me that I quite enjoy. So seeing this photo means a lot to me every day. Next is our other dog photo, and these are actually taken in the same location. 3 of the photos I'll talk about today were taken from this same location. And here we have another nice element of layering, but also of storytelling. And I actually took probably like 30 takes. I was really pressing that shutter for this scene, and I was like mid-conversation with somebody that I was traveling with at the same time. So I'm there and I'm like, there's something here. I need the right moment. So I kept taking photos, and this to me was the most perfect one. I was adjusting focus. I think the dog is in pretty good focus. And again, I've talked about this image before, and it really is one of my favorites. you obviously have a nice leading line of this trail here with covered by this fort where we're at. And so the line over here is really drawing in the light and accentuating where the dog is. You can even see its shadow and its backlit, which is really, really aesthetically pleasing and really shapes the dog. It looks very cool. The dog's position and how it's looking is also very nice, and it's looking back to its owner, but I'll get back to that in a second. On the left side, we have a lot of shadow, which is very, very pleasant, and again, draws our eye in, accentuates the light part, and of course, we have the other shadow part in this other majority side of the frame. But we don't just have a bright light leading straight to the owner standing there. I think that would be more of a shallow photo. I would have had to be taller, and then I think the dog would be a little bit, you'd see more of the top of it and less of its form, less of its figure. So what I did was I got a little bit lower and I used this railing that was at the top because I'm on a separate story. I'm a little bit more elevated than they are. And so I'm not even really focused on the owner. That's not really my interest. I just need to get them in the frame. And so I'm using this railing over here to separate the two subjects here, which would be the dog and the owner. And so by using this rail here, we're adding the separation. What are we looking for? We're looking to break up the separation. He's looking for the owner to come. He's looking for the instructions. The dog is, I guess it could be a female dog as well. Doesn't really matter. But adding this element of out of focus creates that depth that I really look for, creates some more layering, and just pushes our eye even more towards the dog and makes us wonder what the dog is looking back at, which is the owner, who is a little bit hidden behind this hill. You can really see only chest up and from the back. So we have a very clear intent on our focus, very important. And I think all the elements here in the layering and the lighting and the shadow really point us to the subject and ask a question. And that is the element that I'll hone in on this photo, is asking a question. That my question here is, what is the dog waiting for and why? What is it waiting for? Instructions from its owner. And why is it waiting for it? Is because it admires and loves and respects its owner. And I think you can tell that as an emotion in here. And there's just a really nice bond between the two subjects in this photo that I really, really admire. And overall, aesthetically pleasing, good aspects of layering. And so this is one photo that I really like to look at and every day and say, what is the story really here in this photo? And what is it telling? Why is it telling it? And how does it make you feel? And this photo to me discusses all the things that I've just talked about. It's got a lot of feeling to it, a lot of story, and very different from this other one, but also has some similar aspects, but much more story driven. And I want a lot of my photos to be story driven. So this is a great one for me. Definitely one of my favorites. And to pair those two images together on the wall is a little obvious because they're both dog pictures. But one thing that really drove me to pair those pictures together on top of that is the layering and the storytelling elements that I can get from those two images in particular, and what they mean and what different elements from those images put together can really accentuate what I really want to accomplish in photography as a whole. They work together aesthetically as well, and so that's important. But of course, like I said, what they actually mean and how they matter to me, that's the main important part. Don't necessarily have the best angle maybe there for this photo here. This is another photo that I've talked about. Actually, I've talked about all these photos before on my channel if you've stuck around. And here we're actually in the same location, as it's the same fort where I took the two dog photos I've talked about. But this is a different part, and of course it is of a man. It's of a tourist who's sitting here on like I don't really know what it is, but there's very clear signage around that says you shouldn't sit on them. But he was, and he's got his walking stick. He's a slightly bigger person taking his time. And I think also with like the shirt, it says something about pickup trucks. It's very American, very touristy, which I thought was fascinating to the eye. Of course, we're in a touristic location, so that is something that I'm factoring in when I'm taking these photos. How, if I'm going to represent tourism in my photos, which one thing I want to do is avoid taking touristic photos, and I think a tourist isn't going to take this photo, period, but how can I represent the tourism in the area? And so that is one of the major things that I'm trying to grasp in this photo, is that, well, tourists can be intrusive. Tourists can take up space. Tourists can do things that are against the rules sometimes, but also tourists can just like be there, and they're part of the locations. Being from Venice, Italy, like knowing the place, knowing the area, it's hard to sometimes separate the fact that there are going to be a lot of tourists walking around to just it being a city that I'm from, that I know very well and that I love. But sometimes you'll walk around and it's like the tourists are just there mindlessly and you don't really think about it so much. You just know that they're there. And I think in this photo, that is one element that we get. This isn't Venice, Italy. This is in Pula, Croatia, actually at a Venetian fort. But the one element that we get here is that this guy is probably not going to be noticed by many people. He's not going to be noticed by the locals. He's not going to be very noticed. He's just a guy sitting there taking a break after his walk all day, probably around the fort, around the city, around the old center of the city, and he's blending in. But it represents something major about the culture of tourism, of going to a place and taking it over in a way. And what I wanted to do here as well is use these railings. And oftentimes you go to these places and the railings are very thick. So shooting between them is a lot more of an intrusive thing. But the railings here in this location were very thin. And so I'm able to use these a lot more freely, and I was trying to use this one to take up a big part of the frame, but also to really frame the man. And so this creates a window that we're looking at him through, and knowing that we're a little distant from him, it creates that depth, and I think it adds a little bit of scale to the picture in a nice aesthetic way that is not the most major thing, but something that I really like of how this photo turned out. And yeah, with the sunglasses on, the hat on, he maintains some anonymity, which I think is important. And overall, leaving a lot of empty space on the right-hand side of the image over here. I guess depending on how looking at it the right side, I don't know how I should say it, but leaving most of this side empty to just show the location, the grass, the sky, and a little bit more of the railing, I think just pushes your eye closer to just looking at the man and pointing your focus on the underarching theme that I'm talking about of tourists going into a city. So here we have another photo of a person, another one that I've talked about, and this one really is a very striking image to me, one that I really, really like. And it's from Venice, Italy. It's from where I'm from my home city. And it's of a woman pilot here of a Vaporetto. The Vaporettos are the main form of public transportation in Venice. They're the water buses that can transport hundreds of people at a time sometimes, and very crowded often. And if you go to Venice, you're likely going to take one of these, or else you're going to be walking quite a bit, but you're also walking quite a bit anyway, no matter what. One thing that I really, really like about this picture overall is the color quality. Some of my other photos that I've talked about are a lot more vibrant. This photo itself is actually not really that vibrant. It was an overcast day, as you can see from the clouds in the sky in this center part of the image, but really like the green here at the bottom and this off-white roughened up color here in the rope is very subtly colorful. It's a nice color. You can see it, but it adds an atmosphere rather than like a pop. And sometimes I can critique myself. Maybe I go too much for a popping of a color. And another photo that I'll talk about later has that problem. Whether it's a problem or not, it's a critique. It can happen sometimes. I have a varying flavor of taste on this sort of thing. Sometimes I like it more subtle than others, and this is a really good example for me of more subtle color, as well as the blue of her shirt, very, very subtle. And this is the attire of a pilot. You can see she's got gloves on too, a nice watch, and sunglasses for the day. And I mean, I think she's really badass in this photo. This look, she's looking at me like, why are you taking my photo, in a way? Or like, is he taking my photo? But really just serious, unbothered in a way, but starting her day off or ending her day off, I'm not really sure, but it's a very serious look. And she really reminds me of a local Venetian woman. Probably like, why is this guy taking photos? Probably think I'm a tourist when I'm not. But the other element of this photo goes back to the very first photo, and that I talked about is that the layering really goes from left to right as well as forward to back, because we have all these leading lines going up and down the image, these posts, the entrance to the sitting area in the Vaporetto right here. And you don't see the other side, but you see the railing going up, so we're at a slight diagonal. You can't really tell, but if you're familiar with it, then you would understand that. We got the ropes here, and then we've got different signs in the forward and the back that add a little bit of scale for like, carry your bag, don't wear it on your back. I mean, public transport, You should know that. It is so annoying. But yeah, and then we have the mirror where you can see the back of her head. I think that's a neat little touch. And I think whenever you have a mirror in an image and it doesn't show the photographer, it's always a nice little touch to just separate the photographer from the image in a way, which I think is really neat. But yeah, a lot of leading lines up, and then this one's cutting across it, but there's also some depth here. Like I said, this is more out of focus than this is, even though they take up the same role in the image. Everything further back is still pretty much in focus, but you can see like the stairs are going down here, so this is further back than this is, and that just adds a lot of scale to her as she's taking up pretty much the entire frame from top to bottom, which is also super neat if you ask me. So overall, very pleased with this image and how it turned out, what it represents, a Venetian woman at work, on a boat, on the water. How much more Venetian can you get? And it's another representation of the interaction between the locals and the tourists, because of course locals use Vaporetto, but a lot of tourists do as well. And I had 2 dog photos and then I had 2 people photos, and the reason that I put those together is not just that they are people, but how they are a representation of the relationship of tourists and locals to the community. So the first image of the man, I'm thinking, well, a tourist is blending in and can go unnoticed. It's not a photo, that's not a photo that most people would take. Whereas I'm sure people have taken a photo of Vaporetto pilot drivers as tourists. Like, look at this person, they're driving the boat, trying to make things more like magnificent or showy than maybe they need to be. This is their job. This is the lifestyle. This is what it means to live in Venice. And so that's life. And so I'm taking a photo of a woman in her place, and her interaction with tourists is of service in a way, but interacting with tourists over and over and over again quite a bit, and it's very much in your face rather than hiding away. So there are different story elements, different underlying reasoning to the photos and what the people in the photos represent, but also the framing that I wanted was very like taking up one part of the image and then the rest of it can tell part of the story or draw your eye, or both, to the subject. And matter of fact framing where the layering is pushing your eye inwards rather than all over the place, and the expressions as well, serious, not like a smile, not like a yell, not someone drunk or anything. Very serious, matter of fact, like a human photo. I think you can see the humanity within both of those people, the tiredness of the man, the seriousness and the weirdness sometimes of the woman. So depending on how you see her. So those are elements that I really enjoy from those photos, and 2 of my favorite ones. Tells me when I'm going out to take photos of people, and I want to take photos of people sometimes, try not to be intrusive, of course, and I think these people have some anonymity, but also when I take a photo of a person, have some meaning behind it. What do they represent to the place that they are? How am I framing them in a way to show them in the location where they are, the Vaporetto, the top of a fort, which is touristic or whatever, and sometimes how the color is, and what expression do they have, which frame to use, that if I take more than one. So that style of work is definitely something I want to take more of, and something that inspires me to find the story and the motivation behind photos all the time. Here I am in my dining room for the last 5 images that I'll talk about here. A couple of them are self-explanatory. This one, for instance, I have it printed because it got exhibited, and which is super cool and I'm very proud of, and overall it's an image that I really like as well. Very much tells a story, has a lot of scale, shows the atmosphere of this location, has some story. So again, this is another photo that I've talked about and one that I really, really like. And when I look at it, it reminds me, hey, I can be exhibited. I am good enough at times, depending on what the exhibit is and who the jury is, of course. And so really good feeling for me, but also this abstract nature that still has story, still has shape, is something that I do want to look at and remind myself that I can get images like that. And black and white, super, super pleasing to the eye for me. So yeah, so overall, without going too far into it, because this one I've definitely talked about several times on my channel, very fun and very good image in my opinion, and one that I really like to have on the wall. And I've had it in a few different places, and now I have it in the dining room, which obviously I eat food in several times a day. It's something that I can look at and see, hey, I crafted something a little bit different here, using the shadows, using the light. How can I bring that into my photography moving forward. Sliding down all the way to the other side is another image that I've had exhibited of like 4 or 5 that I've had exhibited in a black frame I needed for this particular exhibit. So that's why I have it. And now moving forward, I have a black and white gallery worthy frame. But this one was my first one, or one of my first ones that got exhibited, and another one that I've talked about over and over again on my channel because it's one of my first photos that I really, really loved. I think it's still in my portfolio to this day. And I really love the leading lines, the design of the image, the scale of the image that you can see with all the empty space in the sky and then the clouds peeking over the stairs at the bottom and the men waiting. What are they waiting for? There's so much story here. There's so much shape. Again, like with the previous photo, shape is very important, especially when you're using a lot of shadows and light, something that I really need to focus in on. It's a little bit of a different style of lighting scenarios than previous photos I've talked about, like the dogs and the people. Those didn't really have all these harsh shadows, or in this particular style anyway. But this is a scenario that's going to happen, especially in cities, not just like Venice, but cities all over. The light at one point of the day is always going to be casting certain shadows through buildings when there's a lot of tall buildings. So how are you using the shadows to create your story? And here I'm using it to frame these people who are also darker aspects of the frame. But if there's too much black, not enough black, then you're not really leading the eye to the subject, which is the men here. So a lot of story, a lot of shape, a lot of character here. Using the shadows, that's something that I need to keep on thinking about when I'm shooting these scenarios, and another reason why I want this right in front of my face every day to look at. Between those 2 photos, I have this black and white photo. So these 3 at the bottom of these 5 photos that I have in my dining room are all black and white. And this is, again, one of my favorite photos. I've talked about it before, of these 2 people on the Rialto Bridge in Venice. So we have 3 Venice photos here, all back to back. And I think there is so much story here. And I've talked about it before. You can theorize what their relationship is. Are they just strangers that happen to be on the same tour? Are they a couple? Maybe they've been arguing. There seems to be some tension between them. There's a lot of like, what is the expression here? Are they bored? Are they tired? Are they jet lagged? I don't know. In my mind, the story I want is a little bit of a tragic romance. I like tragedies. I like romance. And I mean, in my head, they had an argument this morning, but they signed up for this tour, so they gotta go. They're just not really gonna talk to each other as they're on it. And I happen to capture that moment. 2 people in the middle of a crowd. It also feels like we're looking at somebody that we know maybe, but because he's looking at us, whereas she's looking down, looking away. But then the entire crowd in the background, really nice fall off of the soft focus, whereas like the people here, you can tell, make them out more, but then less and less and less and less, all taking these photos, all into the scene, into the Rialto Bridge, into the Grand Canal that you can see off the Rialto Bridge. But they're in their own world. They're looking down. They're moving on. They have something else going on. There's story there, and it's aesthetically pleasing. There's story, and to me, seeing this photo every day tells me what can I capture that's gonna have a little bit of more curiosity. What's gonna like really strike my nerve here and say, like, what is the relationship between those people? Between what's happening here? And that is something that I really admire from this photo, and I knew it when I took the photo. I was like, wait a minute, that one's gonna be good when I look at it later. So very cool. Very happy to have it on my wall. Definitely means something to me. Now moving upwards, this is above me, so it's gonna be, I guess this angle is a little weird, but this is another one of my favorite photos. It is from Venice, but in color, and I've talked about it again. To me, this photo feels like a memory, but like current. Like when I took the photo, I was like, wait a minute, now that I'm looking at it, like as I'm seeing this image through the lens of the camera, through the lens of my eye too, it's like, it feels like a memory. And looking at the photo, it feels like a distant, romanticized memory. It's golden hour. There's a lot of beautiful color quality coming out from the sun off to the left of the camera. And we're using the layer of this window really nicely. I've talked about this in my layering video, that the layering here is very obvious, but very intentional, and intentional to leave this side open on the right side and then this darker part here. So there's different facets of the window that we're shooting through, but the open side is very aesthetically pleasing and has in the center the people on the boat. And that's where the memory really comes out of. It gives you this feeling of the wind blowing through your hair with somebody, with your friends. It doesn't have to be on a boat. Maybe most people don't have that experience. So maybe you're driving through in the car with the windows down with your friend, or as a kid with your parents or something. And it gives that nostalgic feeling of being in the wild, in movement with people, having a good feeling and looking back on it and wishing you could have that again. I don't know. I'm nostalgic for those experiences sometimes, oftentimes. And again, the color quality is really nice. And the blue of the water pairs really nicely with the golden elements. Blue and gold go really nicely together. There's beautiful focus here and nice contextualization in the background of different islands in the distance that we are in Venice. So overall, one of my absolute favorite photos. And when I'm looking at it, this is one of the ones where I'm like, what is the feeling that I'm able to capture in an image? And I mean, there's so many different things that I'm talking about here. Maybe they seem more abstract, more like thinkers that come later. But when you're photographing, you want to think about these different things. So is this a feeling photo? Is this a contextualization photo? Is this a story photo, a layer photo? I mean, I think it'd be impossible to get everything all in one, but sometimes you're able to pair a few of these different things together. And here we do have layers, here we do have feeling. And when I look at this photo, I'm like, wait a minute. Sometimes I do want a photo that really feels like it could be at any point in time in history, but really takes you back somewhere else that maybe you've never even been, but a feeling that you want to attach to this image. And I've talked to people before, and I feel like they also get this impression that they're attaching a feeling to this image, even though they don't have this particular experience. Maybe I'm rambling on now, but what I get from this image is to focus in on the feelings that you can get from photography. And the last image I'll talk about today is this photo from Jekyll Island, Georgia. So I had Croatia, I had Venice, a lot of Venice, and now we're just randomly going to Jekyll Island, Georgia. It's another photo that I took in 2025, and another one that I really enjoy. And it has a lot of the same elements as the other photos, but one thing in particular that sticks out that I did mention when talking about this previous photo, but timelessness. I think this is aided by the aesthetics of the people in the photo, but also by the lighting and the shallow depth of field. So here we have this tree, and again, I've talked about this photo before, but we have this tree coming through and cutting across the frame, and it creates a lot of shapes and textures here, but the tree itself is not in focus. It's just slightly out of focus, not too much, not too little. So you see that it is a tree. You see the different details of the different branches on the tree, but it's out of focus. It's not the main thing that we're looking at. It's just something to help us tell the story. So the real story falls from the kids here between the trees, and then the kids and the two women in the water. And before I talk about them, let's take a look at the color quality. So the water is blue, the sky is blue. They're the same pretty much level of blue. The intensity is not very strong. It's very flat, muted, and what happened is this is like 4 p.m. in the middle of the summer. The sun is super bright. The image is actually like slightly overexposed even maybe. And what you get is a washed out image. But this actually really helps give the aesthetic feeling of this photo being able to have been taken at any point in time, because when we associate things with the past, we don't necessarily always associate them with super vibrant colors. And we've had instances here of black and white photos. We've had very vibrant color images. The woman on the Vaporetto I mentioned, not very vibrant, and this again, not very vibrant. But this overall monochrome background between the water, between the sky, and really the wet sand too, really gives a lot of clarity to our subjects here, the two women, the two kids, and the other two kids in the back. And what the women are wearing feels like it could be out of any point in history. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be 2025. It could be the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 50s even. I don't really know historically speaking of the fashion, but it gives you that impression, which I think is very important. And there are women looking after their children in the water as they play in the sand. And there's this real big family appeal to this image. And it also gives me the impression with the two kids in the back that it's like a family dinner, but not everybody wants to be there. Some people just want to play in their room. Some people want to do their own thing. And the separation between them is not necessarily one of like distance of like in a negative way. It's just of a different interest and of a different period almost. And I don't know, I feel like different people can associate different things with the meaning of that image, but this in particular sticks out to me as family, as timelessness. And I've had other photos, and I've talked about it in the past on my channel, of different photos. A photo that doesn't necessarily need to have been taken in 2025, 2026, 2024. It could be from any other decade. And obviously, a lot of those decades I wasn't even alive in. But I think that feeling is what is going to help this image in particular get better over time, but also never really lose its validity. And I think that's actually semi-true, if not overall true, of most of the photos that I've talked about today, is that over time they won't really lose their value because of how they were taken. Some of the photos very vibrant, you can tell they were digital photos on a nice modern contemporary camera, yes, but I think 30 years down the line it's not going to be like, well, like what was that? It's going to feel like a photo that could have been taken that day. It's going to feel like a photo that could have been taken in 2010. And I think that's a very important thing when I'm looking at my photo, is that I want them to not just speak about right now. I want them to be able to speak as we continue to go on. And I really started that feeling when I took this photo. This is one of the oldest photos that I have here, even though it's still 2025. But when I took this photo, I was like, what is it that when I look at this photo that it really appeals to me? It was that. It was that timelessness. So the main reason I have it up here is because I love it, but it's the first one that really gave me this feeling that that is something I really want to keep chasing, and how an image feels. So that is going to do it for today. I don't really know how long this video is because I've shot it in little bits, but I think overall I've been able to explain why each photo is on my wall and what it actually means to me and how it affects me as a photographer, seeing it every single day on my wall, walking past it, walking and stopping to look at it, what it reminds me of before I go on a photo walk, what it tells me that I should look out for. And these are very important reasons to have photos on your wall that you take or that you really admire from other photographers, whatever it might be. To me, these inspire me and help me become a better photographer all the time. I've even got photos above my computer on my desk that have the same purpose. Some of them are repeats, and I change them out a little bit from time to time to say, like, there are images that I'm like, wait, I want to focus on this aspect of my photography or of photography in general. How are stories being told? How am I layering them? How are the colors? And when were they taken is the questions here. And so having these reminders of what you want your photography to be and to mean, super important. So hopefully I've inspired you to maybe print your own work and put it up and really ask yourself what it means. And hopefully it can help you become a better photographer. And I think that's what we're all looking for to do. I want to be much better than I am now. So that is my goal as well. I've been Tony King. I'm a photographer. If you enjoyed this video and liked what I had to say, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more content just like this, but also way different, but all about photography. I'll see you next time. Peace.